It's 6 p.m. on Monday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. And these are the headlines we're following at this hour. Seoul warns it will mount a strong response to Pyongyang for planting landmines that maimed 2 South Korean soldiers last week. President Park Geunhye delves into a slate of issues today, from voicing regret about North Korea's decision to change its time zone to urging Japan to acknowledge history and work on improving ties with its neighbors. Plus, Japanese local media outlet NHK reports that an apology for wartime atrocities is included in Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's statement marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. South Korea's defense ministry says North Korea was responsible for a landmine explosion at the heavily fortified demilitarized zone last week that seriously injured 2 South Korean soldiers. The ministry also warns of a harsh response to the incident. Our Hyun-bin starts us off.
The defense ministry said Monday that debris from the mines was recovered after a thorough survey of the site, and they've concluded that the debris is from a PMD series mine. This device is identical to the kinds of landmines typically used by Pyongyang. The Joint Chiefs of Staff has condemned North Korea for its actions.
These acts by Pyongyang violate the armistice agreement and the non-aggression pact. We urge North Korea to apologize for its provocations and punish those involved. As we have previously warned, we will make Pyongyang pay dearly for its provocations.
In response to the incident, South Korea started broadcasting at certain points along the border, announcing Pyongyang's illegal provocations on the peninsula. This is the first time since 2004 the military has resumed the broadcast. It's believed that North Korean soldiers crossed a military demarcation line late last month to lay the mines, which were planted around a gate guarded by the South Korean military that opens to the DMZ.
There are limitations with the surveillance equipment alone, so we usually conduct searches and lie in wait. But this incident happened during a regular operation.
Military officials say that North Korea may have planted the mines ahead of a possible incursion into the south and to derail an annual round of military drills between Seoul and Washington, slated for next week. The United Nations Command has condemned North Korea for its actions and reiterated its stance that the armistice agreement should be maintained. It's also planning to propose a general officer-level dialogue with North Korea to discuss the incident. Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
While the landmine explosion findings are bad enough, news ahead of this week's 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule, Pyongyang's decision to change its time zone seems to be putting a damper on Seoul's efforts to bring the 2 Koreas closer together. Our Choi Yoo-sun reports.
President Park Geunhye has expressed deep regret that North Korea has decided to create its own time zone without discussing the matter with South Korea. At a meeting of her senior secretaries on Monday, President Park said she's concerned the time change could further widen the gap between the 2 Koreas.
북한은 분단 고착을 도모하거나 고립의 길로 빠져들지 말고 민족의 동질성과 연계성 회복의 길로 나와야 할 것입니다.
Last week, the North State News Agency said the regime will set its clocks back 30 minutes starting August 15th, the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule at the end of World War II. The 2 Koreas were one country at the time Japan annexed the Korean peninsula, and since then the local time has been the same in the 2 Koreas and Japan. The news agency said Japanese imperialists robbed the peninsula of its own time zone during colonization in order to impose their own. Seoul, on the other hand, says it's keeping the current standard time in accordance with international practice. From the perspective of the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation and the division of the 2 Koreas, President Park said Pyongyang's time change actually hampers Seoul's efforts to narrow the differences between the 2 and revive inter-Korean dialogue.
북한이 우리의 대화와 협력 제안에는 아무런 반응도 하지 않으면서 시간대마저 분리시키는 것은 남북 협력과 평화통일 노력에 역행하는 것이자
The South Korean government expects some short-term inconvenience at the joint Kaesong industrial complex in the north and long-term problems if and when the 2 sides have to agree on standards in preparation for reunification. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
And today, South Korea said it recently attempted to propose talks with North Korea, but Pyongyang refused to receive the offer. Seoul's Unification Ministry said North Korean officials at the border with South Korea said they had no orders from Pyongyang to accept a letter from Seoul. The Unification Ministry made the attempt last Wednesday. It was the same day when Lee Hyo, the widow of former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung, left for a 4-day trip to North Korea. The ministry said Pyongyang's refusal raises doubts about the regime's sincerity to improve ties with the South. It said the government did not ask the former First Lady to carry the message because she made the trip as a civilian. Now, a flicker of hope for Korea-Japan relations. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe could include keywords used by his predecessors on Tokyo's wartime past in his upcoming World War II statement set to be released on Friday. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe could use terms like apology and aggression in his statement to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Citing an unnamed senior government official, NHK reported Monday that Abe may repeat key words used in the Murayama statement released in 1995. That year, former Japanese Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama had expressed feelings of deep remorse and offered a heartfelt apology to mark the 50th anniversary of Japan's surrender. Murayama also acknowledged that Tokyo had inflicted tremendous damage and suffering in Asia through its colonial rule and aggression. Monday's NHK report is a bit more optimistic than previous reports by Japanese media outlets. The Asahi Shimbun reported last week that while Abe reiterated that he would inherit as a whole the statements by his predecessors, the draft of his version did not include the word apology to Asian countries for Japan's role in the war, nor the phrases colonial rule and aggression. Whatever is in the Abe statement will have a huge influence on Korea-Japan relations. Seoul and Beijing, the major victims of Japan's wartime aggression, are closely watching the statements, which will be released Friday. But some say the content will largely depend on the primary audience that Abe has in mind. If his statement is targeted toward Japan's Asian neighbors and the victims of its wartime aggression, the Japanese leader will uphold the Murayama statement. But if he is planning to direct the address to his domestic audience, he may choose to focus on Japan's post-war recovery rather than apologizing for the country's wartime past. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And while all eyes are focused on Abe's statement, President Park has once again urged the Japanese government to acknowledge its wartime history. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
President Park Geunhye says she hopes Japan will take a mature stance on its wartime history for a fresh start on relations with its neighbors. The president made the comment during a regular meeting with her senior secretaries Monday. She also offered her condolences to the family of a woman who passed away last Saturday in the U.S. and who was a survivor of Japan's wartime sexual slavery program. The president expressed her sorrow and apologized for not being able to heal the wounds of history for the 93-year-old and for failing to restore her honor and dignity. President Park also expressed concern that this year, which marks the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule, will be the last chance to resolve the matter. 8 women who were enslaved by Japan during wartime have passed away in this year alone, leaving only 47 alive out of the 238 women registered by the government. Analysts see the president's comments as another attempt to pressure Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to include an apology in an upcoming statement to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Meanwhile, the presidential office also said it's reviewing whether President Park should attend an event in China on September 3rd, marking the anniversary. The presidential office has denied Japanese media reports that U.S. officials asked the Korean leader not to attend the ceremonies, calling them groundless. The White House has also denied the report. On Sunday, Japan's Kyodo News reported Washington made the request through a diplomatic channel. The presidential office is expected to make a decision after further deliberation and said it would take into account what Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says in his statement expected on Friday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Moving on to some other news, the debate over how to split the cost for the U.S. forces Korea will continue to be a contentious issue, especially because the current cost-sharing agreement between South Korea and the U.S. expires in 2018. That's what Leon White, a senior editor of the Fletcher Security Review, wrote in an opinion piece in The Diplomat on Sunday. He said the debate will be fueled in part by changes to defense spending in both countries. The U.S. defense budget will fall by hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years, while South Korea's defense spending for this year has increased by more than 5%, the highest rate of growth since 2011. White said some U.S. lawmakers question why a rich country like South Korea does not contribute more to the bilateral alliance, while Korean politicians say Seoul is already paying more than its fair share. Shifting gears, lawmakers have set the agenda for a parliamentary vote slated for tomorrow. During the session, lawmakers will vote on pending economy-related bills and resolutions to overhaul Korea's disease management system. They will also conduct a special audit of government bodies deemed responsible for the MERS outbreak. Also today, lawmakers set an end date of August 31st for the current parliamentary session and agreed to extend the term of a special parliamentary committee tasked with supporting the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and another on housing assistance for working-class people. Lawmakers will continue to discuss reforms to corporate Korea and the rigid labor market, as well as the scandal surrounding the nation's spy agency. The country's two main rival parties have agreed to hold talks on electoral system reforms, seeming to break an impasse from last week. Their discussions will take place at the committee level. The ruling Saenuri Party has agreed to consider a scheme proposed by the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, in which the NPAD would be allowed to create a new electoral system in exchange for implementing the ruling party's idea for an open primary. At the upcoming talks, the ruling party plans to suggest an open primary system in which independent voters can vote for candidates from any party. Under the NPAD's proposed system, the country would be divided into multiple electoral zones, and parliamentary seats would be allocated according to the percentage of votes obtained by each party in each area. Multiple investigations are now underway on Korea's fifth largest business conglomerate, Lotte Group. The group's cloudy corporate structure and allegations of possible tax evasion were all brought to light by the recent feud within the founder's family. Our Shin Se-min reports.
A thorough investigation into retail giant Lotte Group is picking up a head of steam. Korea's Fair Trade Commission and the Financial Supervisory Service have separately requested Lotte Group provide them with related information. They are looking into Lotte's complicated governing structure and possible tax evasion in light of the nasty family feud within the founder's family. On top of that, the National Tax Service has been leading an investigation into Taehong Communications, the group's affiliated advertisement firm. But Lotte Group has claimed that probe is a separate issue, as it began last month before the family feud kicked off. The NTS is believed to be studying related data on the group's advertisement arm, as Lotte Hotel, the de facto holding company of the group's Korean business units, owns a controlling stake of 12.8% in the firm. The tax agency's probe has led to speculation the NTS may be looking into other parts of the group, not just a communications firm. Lotte Group's recent revelation of its opaque governance structure could even lead to a creation of a new law. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy and a dozen other minor party members have proposed a bill called the Lotte Law. It would be aimed at stopping conglomerates from seeking loopholes in cross-shareholdings through controlling overseas affiliates. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics topped nearly every smartphone market in the world in the second quarter. Samsung finished second in North America to Apple, though. Industry tracker Strategy Analytics says Samsung sold the most smartphones in Europe, Latin America, and Asia Pacific, the Middle East, and Africa last quarter. Industry watchers attribute Samsung's strong global presence to sales of low to middle-end devices, and the Galaxy S6, which together totaled nearly 72 million units. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.